we sleep 20 years of our life, we're sleeping.
Yeah.
And so if you can cut it in half, you get an extra 10 years of living. If you think about it like that way, that is an incredible reason to, do the gene editing to get the Trump gene. But the thing that nobody knows is what
we could ski all day and play poker all night.
The thing that they don't know is, Trump and Clinton were born with that gene from day one. And what they don't know is what could go wrong if you injected it and manipulated yourself at the age of 30 or 40 or 50.
Yeah, of course.
But wouldn't it be incredible if you could all of a sudden only sleep 4 or 5 hours and be completely rested?
Hi everyone, welcome to Smart Invest. Trillions of dollars are sitting in money market funds right now, doing nothing. One very wealthy investor, Chamath Palihapitiya, thinks that cash is like dry powder. In a recent episode of the Olin podcast, Chamath made an interesting prediction. If the Federal Reserve starts to lower interest rates, it could cause a huge change in the prices of goods and services in the markets. This could happen because of problems in the economy or political pressure. He thinks the S&P 500 could even go as high as 7,000. Chamath's prediction is based on a main idea. If Jerome Powell backs down and loosens up on policy, the speed of money could skyrocket as capital that has been sitting on the sidelines floods back into risky commodities. Some Olin hosts, like David Friedberg, say that this confidence may be based more on inflation than real economic factors. David Sachs, on the other hand, thinks that inflation is already under control and that RATE cuts have been overdue for a long time. Chamath's prediction of a possible market melt-up stands out. He thinks that a lot of money is ready to move quickly. What does this mean for crypto? Everything. If just a small amount of that idle capital starts to look for returns, stocks, Bitcoin, and other digital assets could all be hit by a huge wave of new money. In short, what the Fed does next could be the spark that starts the next big part of the bull run. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on alerts before we go into the full analysis. This will help you stay on top of the big trends that are affecting crypto and the markets.
Can I up-level this slightly?
Sure.
I think that this has been probably the most important week, and I would almost say most important few months in U.S. politics in 30 or 40 years. And the reason is that it starts to converge a bunch of things together that I think are really worth putting on the table. So from my perspective, I think what President Trump has done is almost single-handedly bring back the United States as the global superpower. And I would put that in all caps. So what does it mean to be a superpower? I've said this several times, but just to be slightly redundant, in order to be a superpower, I think you need to have three things, but they work in a hierarchy. The first is that you need to have technical supremacy. And then from that technological supremacy, you need to establish and project economic supremacy and military supremacy. So if you look at the first one, you saw a tactical demonstration of technological supremacy with the B-2 bombers. But taking a more general step back, if you look at the largest companies in the world, who are the ones that are actually driving the world forward? These are all American companies. I think these last few months, you've seen America firing on all cylinders technologically. Economically, at the same time, you now have the stock market back at all-time highs. You have interest rates incredibly starting to compress, even in the absence of the Federal Reserve willing to act on data. So you're projecting economic supremacy. And then these last few weeks, frankly, have been a pretty clear-cut case of military supremacy. And so I think what's pretty simple now is like the US is essentially telling the world our words carry weight again. We're going to shape the global order. Countries will now have to calibrate their actions around what the US is willing to tolerate and what it isn't willing to tolerate. And in the case of Iran, the president made those lines, I think, really crystal clear. He warned them 100 times where the line was. And he was clear. You cannot build nuclear weapons. And when the line was crossed, and look, I think the CNNs of the world want to debate that the line wasn't crossed. All I can tell you is I don't know because I don't have access to the intel. I believe what he and Tulsi Gabbard and JD Vance and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth are saying is that they crossed the line, and then he showed that he will use decisive military force when that happens. But then here's what's crazy, and this is where I think you become a real superpower. It's what happens after. Once you cross the line, you notice that he doesn't try to humiliate or dominate Iran. He tells Iran that he wants them to stabilize themselves. He told them that he wants to see them trading oil with China. He wants to see them improving the lives of their people because he realizes that a stable Iran is a stable Middle East. So I think it's really amazing. And then the fact that he was able to bring Israel and Iran, who's been on the verge of some kind of conflict for decades, and broker a ceasefire, it's a really important moment, I think, in American history. I really do think that if you look at my little framework, it is the closest thing for us to being able to say that we are truly a clear-cut, singular hegemon global superpower again. Fear that I had was that if there was a protracted conflict, what you effectively would see is a bunch of supply go offline. And if that supply went offline, and as long as the demand stayed even roughly the same, you would see prices go up. My thought was that the price of oil could double. I think Goldman had it slightly under a doubling. So that was definitely the fear, what folks had going into that weekend. But coming out of it, this is where I think you have to be very respectful of the fact that the market is really the sum of many, many, many millions of informed opinions. And I think what they saw was that Iran was not really in a position to do anything but capitulate and give up. And I think that what they also saw, whether you agree with the Israeli policy or not, was that they had systematically gone from where they are and marched eastward, essentially. They effectively decapitated Hamas. They effectively decapitated Hezbollah. They effectively decapitated the Houthis. I think finally putting a nail in the coffin of this Iran nuclear ambition program was not just important for them, but it's critical for Saudi and the UAE.
Yes.
You know, MBS had an incredibly powerful quote, which was, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, we will have no choice but to get our own, right? So by taking all of that risk off the table, what you're now talking about is an enormous supply that could essentially service world productivity needs unhindered. Because it's not just Iranian supply, you're talking about Emirati supply, and you're talking about Qatari supply, and you're talking about Saudi supply. So I think what the market realized was, okay, now the Middle East is the closest it's ever been to fully monetizing the oil that they have and to invest aggressively into their own people. The second thing is that Steve Witkoff spoke about the fact that you should expect the Abraham Accords to expand. So if you think about that 1-2 punch, not necessarily from a geopolitical lens, but from an economic lens, the first punch is neutering the Iranians' ability to be chaos monkeys in the region. But the second punch is the one that then now creates normalization across the region with Israel. It double and triples down the ability to monetize oil and start to invest those returns in future projects that have a much better ROI.
Yeah.
All of that leads to cheaper energy.
And Iran becomes the odd person out here in this new, federation of people in the Middle East who want peace and normal relations.
Yeah.
I think
it's a phenomenal question, Jason, but I think that's what the market sniffed out. And I think that's what the market is now saying, like, that this is a chapter that we can close and move on.
As the hosts of the All In podcast argue about the future of the market, 3 clear points of view stand out. Chamath Palihapitiya thinks that the conditions are ideal for risk assets because trillions of dollars in cash are sitting idle and the speed of money is increasing. If the Fed lowers interest rates, he thinks a lot of money will come into the markets, which will make everything from stocks to crypto go up. David Friedberg is more cautious. He says that rising asset prices could be caused by monetary confusion instead of real growth, and they could be a sign of an inflationary trap. David Sachs takes a more realistic view. He says that inflation is under control, and that the Fed is just waiting for the right time to cut rates, which will help the markets. Even though they have different ideas, everyone agrees on one thing: something big is about to happen. When liquidity returns, it could start the next part of the crypto bull run. Then the topic changes to the unrest in the Middle East, where people are afraid of an oil shock and its effects on the market as a whole.
I think the three of you guys are a little exaggerated, to be quite honest. I mean, all the rhetoric sounds very clever, but I don't think it's accurate. I think the way that I see it is more nuanced than this. I think what's happened is that Zoran Mamdani is very smart and is running a playbook to win, like all politicians do, based on a formula that has been winning in large cities for the past decade. And so I don't know if he really believes in this rhetoric or not, but it's worth noting that most of his platform is copied and pasted from London and Chicago. So the things that he's talked about, universal basic free meals, affordable housing, freezing the cost of transportation, public grocery stores, all three of you are reacting like these things were pulled out of thin air. They're not. These were the public platforms of the mayors who have won in London, in Vienna, in Havana, Cuba, and in Chicago. So I think the reason why this works is that these are small pockets in the end of a large political spectrum. Even though New York feels big, it isn't that big in the context of the United States. And what you see is that when you try to take those policies in a city, take London, and then level it up at the national level, there's a quick schism that happens. So if you look at Labour, and Labour trying to scale up the policies of a Sadiq Khan in London throughout the country, Labour is now at the Labour Party, the absolute lowest approval ratings in the UK of any party ever in this moment in time after an election. So I think what you're probably seeing is quite a sophisticated A/B test. And I think that the political wingmen and the money people that want to be in control know how to run candidates on platforms that can win. And this is a clear winning strategy in left-leaning major metropolitan centers. So what I would say, just to refine what you guys are saying, is that this platform is not new. I've seen it for the last decade. I think you're going to see it for the next few decades. It doesn't work. And so you're going to see the same results in New York City that you've already seen in London, which has become unlivable, sadly, one of my favorite cities in the world. If you don't believe it, go visit there. Chicago, which I haven't been to in 15 years and will never go to, it's a disaster. So my point is, it just doesn't work. So you can win. It actually isn't very effective, and it doesn't scale to the national level, which is my view. My view is much more basic. It's much less sophisticated than I think what you're saying. My extremely simpleton view of things is that humans swing in a pendulum-like fashion between poles. And over multi-decade arcs, you go between the thing that works to the thing that should work now because it's not the thing before. So I suspect what happens is that New York takes a 40 or 50-year journey, and at some point, it will look like New York of the 80s. And at that point, you'll have an Ed Koch-like figure. You'll have a David Dinkins-like figure. You'll have a Michael Bloomberg-like figure. You'll have the broken windows theory of policing reemerge as the cause célèbre. And the cycle will repeat itself. So I tend to think that these things are just between two poles. We've spent a lot of time in this more independent self-reliance pole. A lot of people will want to experiment with this other thing. It just doesn't prove to work. And in the absence of something cataclysmically bad, I don't think it's going to change. Other than the novelty of all of this, do you think there will be something in the market, some injectable or something that's average people like us can take in the next 5 or 10 years to solve a problem that we have or to live longer with higher health?
Yes, there are clinicals underway right now. And I know of the clinical trials that are underway.
Like in stage 3, you're saying? Phase 3 clinical trials?
Early stage 1 in humans.
Like 1As?
Yeah, very early.
So maybe a decade from now.
I think that's right. Well, look, I mean, let's see what the FDA does. But the FDA is trying to accelerate outcomes here, as you know.
Blake Byers came to my house for poker. He's sponsoring a study at UCSF, which I thought was incredible. You know the gene that allows Donald Trump to sleep 4 hours?
Yeah.
They've isolated that gene.
Yeah.
Clinton had that gene too. And Blake is sponsoring a trial to basically edit a handful of subjects who want that gene to see if they can sleep 4 hours and be rested. So I don't know if you guys know this, and he explained this to me, and it makes so much sense, but I didn't realize it. We sleep 20 years of our life, we're sleeping.
Yeah.
And so if you can cut it in half, you get an extra 10 years of living. If you think about it like that way, that is an incredible reason to, do the gene editing to get the Trump gene. But the thing that nobody knows is what
we could ski all day and play poker all night.
The thing that they don't know is, Trump and Clinton were born with that gene from day one. And what they don't know is what could go wrong if you injected it and manipulated yourself at the age of 30 or 40 or 50.
Yeah, of course.
But wouldn't it be incredible if you could all of a sudden only sleep 4 or 5 hours and be completely rested?
There's one thing that's clear. We're in the middle of a historic change in global markets and politics. Trillions of dollars in idle capital are looking at risky assets. Central banks are slowly moving toward a pivot, and the Middle East may be entering a new era of energy, impact, and modernization. Friedberg says not to mix up gains caused by inflation with real growth. Chamath says this is a once-in-a-generation chance, and Sachs says fear could be a sign to buy. The main thing that crypto buyers should remember is that Bitcoin and other digital assets don't sit around when money starts to flow again. This could be the start of a very exciting new era for both centralized and decentralized banking. Are you ready for it? That's the big question. How do you feel about Chamath's bold S&P 7000 call? What do you think it could mean for crypto in Q3? Like, follow, and click the bell if you thought this summary was helpful. That way, you'll never miss a key idea.